Sir Stíven Frái, welcome to Greece.
Thank you. Delight to be here.
It's such a great pleasure to have you here, especially this weather, sunny Athens.
Zesty.
Zesty, okay. I asked you if you would like to run this interview in Greek.
I wish I could. I really wish I could, but then milou Ellenika. I don't really speak the language, but I love it. I mean, at school I studied ancient Greek until I was 14, 15, so I didn't take it very far, but I loved it. I loved it. I loved the alphabet. I loved the sounds. It just appealed to me.
Now, right on the table, we have 2 out of 4 books named Heroes, which means heroes, and mythos, myth.
Yeah.
Yet, you have another book called Οδύσσειας.
Yes.
And that's the 4th book out of a series of 4 books based on Greek mythology. So, can really a hero find his way home, believe?
Yes, that is the question, isn't it? Finding his way home. And I became so interested when I, started to research the Οδύσσειας, I should say. In England we say Οδύsseus. What I wasn't so aware of, in a sense, was the whole mystery of nostos, this idea, this deep idea obviously within the breast of Οδύsseus, but also that it exists all over the world now. And the Odyssey, the Homer Odyssey, seems to be the first expression, maybe because this was when, for the first time, human beings felt that the home and the hearth, Eikos, the hearth, was the center of their life, not the temple or the ship or the gods anymore, but they were in charge of their own lives. The Greeks led the world. They seemed to be the first society that had this fantastic sense of gods, told these amazing stories, and then ended it with a man going home to his wife. In a sense, it's a very simple story. And the gods are reduced and reduced and reduced. Athena is there on Ithaca, and Zeus is sort of there. There's an eagle and an owl sometimes, but essentially it's really just about this man getting home. And there's a moment when, he's on the island of Ogygia, where, I don't know how you pronounce that. Ogygia, with Calypso. And she says to him, of course you want to go because Ithaca's so beautiful. And he said, no, Ithaca's not beautiful. It's terrible. It's a land for goats. You could hardly have sheep. Yours is a paradise, this island.
Well, it's part of Greece anyway.
Well, exactly. And she says, well, of course you have your wife who's so beautiful. He says, well, she'll be old now. She'll be like me. She's not a goddess like you, but she's my wife. And I want to smell the smoke coming from my hearth. And that's an amazing thing, because the heroes of, the Trojan War, Agamemnon and Achilles, they didn't talk like that. They didn't have that sense. And I think that's why we live in a time when more and more people are returning to Greek myths, because it's very difficult to write a story set in the present day unless you also have an understanding of each character's views on race and gender and sexuality and history and culture. You know what I mean? What you might call the discourse, the conversations we're all having about the history of the West and the guilt and the complicity in slavery, and all these things are now stitched into our awareness so much that if you have a modern story, you want to know what each character thinks. Whereas when you set it in the time of myth, you can have honor, betrayal, love, death, revenge.
It's like a movie, isn't it?
Yeah, you can have all the great, powerful human emotions, but without the details of our own time, which, you get caught in the weeds of that, like in the water, when your leg is stuck, you can't swim any further forward because you've got to keep looking at the modern discourse.
Yet you have found a way to actually approach Odyssey in a way that is so simple to understand, lighthearted as well. In some cases, it's very hilarious the way that you write about it, and I think that's your key selling point, if I'm allowed to say that.
Yes, no, I'm probably talking far too seriously when answering your questions, because these are human stories and they are incredibly good fun. And when people ask me why I love Greek myths so much, sometimes a word I found myself using is they have so much juice. You know, that they are so rich in juice, the lifeblood of humans, and the laughter and the oddity and the human comedy.
Are there any parallels that you can draw between the challenges faced by Odysseus in his journey and the struggles we face today?
Well, yes, both as individuals, we all have a sense of where we should be, where we belong, a sense of home. And I think a lot of people are unhappy because they haven't got where they feel they should be. Someone wrote, it was a Welsh writer many years ago, most people are cursed by the fact that when they get to the top of the ladder, they realize the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall.
Okay.
And I think it's very well put. And we make journeys through life, and we use the word journey all the time now. It's used for everything. You hear people talk about my cancer journey and all these things. I can say that because I had it myself. Everything is my journey. I had some cancer a few years ago. Fortunately, it's all fine.
You're fine now.
I am absolutely fine, don't worry.
We wish you all the best.
Oh, thank you very much. I always have the idea first, then the king has it afterwards. So the king copied me. Of course, it is the journey itself that is the destination. There's that wonderful poem by the great Greek poet Cavafy, his poem Ithaca, tells us, it is once you get there, there's nothing. Because once you get to Ithaca, in a sense, that's death, that's the end of your life. But it's the journey, it's the problems you solve, it's how you behave, how you conduct yourself.
It's the journey that matters, really.
It's the journey that matters, yeah. And of course, the journey wouldn't make any sense unless you had an Ithaca to go to. But once you're there, it's kind of phew. And that you can close the page. Yeah, it's over. In the early 90s, I had essentially a nervous breakdown. And things, were very difficult. I left a play that I was in. I ran away, essentially went to Europe. And it was all very unfortunate. But I'd only realized when I got back, people were very sympathetic and very kind. And taxi drivers would say, "Oh, you're right, Steve." And I'd say, "Yes, I'm fine, thanks." They said, "Because you went off the rails. You went off the rails, didn't you?" Right. And I would say, yes. And then one day, I suddenly thought, hang on, who on earth wants to be on rails? So someone saying to you, "Oh, he went off the rails," you can say, "Great, lucky person." Because to be on rails is to be imprisoned. You can't choose where you're going. The rails decide. We're on the rails that take you to this school, to this university, to this job, this mortgage, this, and then you're dead because you were on rails. Well, why not get off the rails? Because a rail is just an inverted rut, and we all know no one wants to be in a rut.
So do you think that Greek mythology helped you get out of rails?
And that's what I mean by the beauty of Greek mythology is it's pure. For me in particular, because I don't speak fluent Greek, I'm seeing the actions of the characters, the mortals and the immortals, pure actions based on rage or love or lust or fear, whatever they are, and they're not, they're not disguised or impeded, hampered by language. I mean, the language is fun when you have it. It's lovely when you talk to the gods and the gods have, it's nice to use the language for it, to tell the story, but it's pure.
I'm going to go back right at the beginning of the interview.
Yeah.
When I asked you about Arkhaίου, would he be able to find his way home? Now, I would like to ask you, can the sculptures of Parthenon find their way home?
Oh, please. I'm so glad you asked this because, as you know, I think it is a very...
You're a very prominent
I'm very passionate about
that,
this, yes. And there are personal reasons as well as, the reasons of natural justice, as you might say. My friend, the great journalist and writer, Christopher Hitchens, he was a friend of Melina Mercouri, And she told him way back in the 60s and 70s about the Elgin marbles. And he wrote a book about it. He died of cancer, and he also refused to call it a cancer journey. And when he was dying, he said, "Can you make sure you don't forget this when I'm gone?" And it was like he was leaving me in his will. There is a possibility, it seems to me, that it's getting very close. And I'm always very hesitant to say that because things get in the way. But there's that four-letter word that has been a problem, the lend or loan, that the British Museum has preferred the idea that, all right, we'll lend them to you. And the Greek government, quite understandably, I think, feels, well, that you can't lend something that doesn't belong to you, you know. And I, because I'm a writer, I try and think of the right word, because it is simply a word. And I was trying to think of what word would do, and I wondered about collaboration. The loan would appear in the Acropolis Museum. Imagine where the spaces now are for the sculptures that are in London. They would be returned, and there would be a sign, because the British Museum would want it acknowledged. And I was saying, well, why not? These sculptures have returned to Athens as a result of a collaboration with the British Museum. It's a simple word, collaboration.
But even the word return does imply that that was somewhere else.
Well, they were somewhere else. You won't hide the history, because that's true. They were somewhere else, and it's right to say that they've been returned. And I think in both galleries there should be, especially in the London one, in the Duveen Gallery where they currently reside, that when they go and are returned, repatriated, reunited, then there should be a Parthenon experience there which shows the history, a whole history of Elgin taking them, hacking them off, sawing them off. I mean, it's appalling behaviour. Losing some of them in the sea, eventually coming to London. Everything is possible. I'll give you an example. The British Museum held, for bizarre, I don't know why, reasons, the Constitution of Australia, the literal original document that constituted Australia as a sovereign state. And it was in the British Museum, and by Act of Parliament. And the Australians said, hang on a moment, can we have our constitution, please? And it took 4 minutes for Parliament to change the law. They just went through and nodded it one afternoon when they had a spare 5 minutes. They passed it, and they were returned. The same happened to some appalling shrunken heads from Papua New Guinea that belonged and had a great meaning to the people there. They were returned. So these things can happen. So there's always an excuse from politicians and civil servants and so on. But I do believe, to try and answer your question, I do believe that we are closer than we've been for really as long as I can remember. I think partly because our newish Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, I can't speak for him, it would be wrong to do so, but I don't believe he's against it. Of course, what happens with Prime Ministers is tomorrow he could have a civil servant sit down next to him and say, Prime Minister, I'm going to tell you all the reasons why we should keep the Parthenon sculptures, because that could happen. 99, not 98, not 97, I'm not exaggerating, 99% of everything that the British Museum owns is not on view. It is in cellars and in storage. That's how much stuff they have, how many artifacts and how many objects. It's crazy but true.
Unbelievable.
It is. They could open, pop-up extra ones. It's not necessarily their fault. A lot of it hasn't even been catalogued. I mean, they had an embarrassing scandal with a series of thefts that had been made by someone who worked there, simply because the cataloguing hadn't caught up.
You once said that the sculptures of Parthenon is like looting the Eiffel Tower by the Nazis and then claiming it back.
Yes, I mean, I was merely saying, some people say, well, it was legally given to Elgin by the Sublime Porte of the Ottoman Empire with a Firmana document. And there's no evidence of this document, but that's never mind. Even if this document existed, I'm saying, do you think it would be all right for an American in 1940, when America was not in the war, to go to Paris, which had just been occupied by the Nazis, and buy the Eiffel Tower and have it taken apart and taken to America and put up in his Texas ranch? And then, when Paris is liberated and the French say, can we have the Eiffel Tower returned, please? He's saying, no, I bought it. I bought it fair and square from the owners. But they were the Nazi Germans. Yeah, but they ran the country then. They were in charge of Paris, and I got a document here. No one would believe that the American had the right to keep the Eiffel Tower. Well, the Parthenon is more important to Athens even than the Eiffel Tower is to the French. I mean, it is absolutely the beating heart of what the history of the city means, as well as being the first great example of Doric architecture that has spread around the world.
So would you say that it's time you lost your marbles?
I think that's probably very true. It is a good English expression. And yeah, we definitely need to lose our marbles, there's no question. I mean, and I don't know, it's so hard. I'm not a politician and I don't want to make a prediction because, you know, things, you have to be a little bit wary.
Balanced as well.
You know, things do always take longer than you think they're going to. But I'm a believer that human will can make this work. And with the right people in the right place, a handshake and then people working out the detail. Even if the full detail isn't worked out after they've come back and are in the museum here.
So Οδύσσειας has actually made it back to Ithaca.
Οδύsseus is home.
Οδύsσειas will probably be the sculptures of Parthenon getting back home.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. Exactly. And I want to say hello to all my Greek friends and to thank you again for the welcome I receive whenever I come here. People are so nice to me. And I just adore this country and its history and its myth and culture. And maybe I should repay that by learning the bloody language.
Sir Stíven Frái, thank you very much for this interview. Always delighted to have you here. And I think that the next time we'll meet, we might have some great news to share.
Please, yes. As my grandfather used to say, from your lips to God's ears. So from your lips to Zeus's ears. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.